shelf. So the road to Earth passes by Saturn. That's kind of the original, or the astronomy of Battlestar Galactica. Since we only have an hour, and the book is, what, 300 pages long, I'm going to kind of emphasize more the astronomy of Battlestar, but still go a little bit afield. Spent 15 years here at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I was a scientist on the Cassini spacecraft. There's various aspects of my job. That was my office, my Cylon overlord. You see the button on his chest, it says frack. It was better. My previous office was much smaller, but it was kind of cool because he was right inside the door. It was fun watching people walk in at the Cylon. But anyway, as a scientist, obviously your job is twofold. It is, number one, in studying the universe, nature, and number two, disseminating that to people, and that's what I do both. I've been on a few episodes of The Universe for NASA TV a couple times and stuff. That was fun. I got to co-anchor, when Cassini went into orbit around Saturn, I got to co-anchor on CNN all day for that, so that was kind of fun. Saturn, the Lord of the Rings, and there were actually a lot of influences of Cassini on Battlestar, some of which were very nearly transparent, but which you can see if you know where to look. Titan is a big moon of Saturn. Titan is second biggest moon. It's a good call. Second biggest moon in the solar system. It's actually larger than the planet Mercury. Only moon with a appreciable atmosphere. Its atmosphere is 1.5 times thicker than Earth's atmosphere.
That works.
We can do the dark. They didn't see me. This is more important than I am. One of the most common questions I get asked all the time is, how does one get a job as a science advisor? Well, the answer today is different than it was when I got it. I actually, in a job that's a blend of right brain and left brain, the more creative right brain and the more analytic left brain, I actually came in through the right brain channel, the more creative channel. Back when I was in graduate school at UCLA, turns out that Paramount would take unsolicited manuscripts for their Star Trek series, meaning you could send in a script without an agent. And Paramount made 2 promises. They said, you send us a script, we'll make 2 promises. It'll get read, and within 8 weeks to 8 months, you will get it back. And that's all we'll promise you, because frankly, we get 3,000 scripts a year roughly, and good outcome happens to single digits a year. So they were upfront about the odds, and they said, we'll take it. And so a friend of mine wrote, and I wrote an episode of Star Trek Voyager, called Survival of the Fittest, and we sent it in to Paramount and waited. We knew we were going to wait for a while, ideally, because obviously the 8 weeks to 8 months, if you get back in 8 weeks, the first person read it and said, bleh! And if you wait 8 months, it means that it's worked its way up the chain of command. So we were kind of hoping more for the 8 months part. I was in graduate school, and my dissertation advisor was the biggest hard ass in our department. So I was busy. My friend works at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he has a family. He was busy, but 7 months to the day after we sent it in, we got a call from the executive producer's assistant saying, Jerry, love your story. Goes in a direction we don't really want to go, so we can't use it, which, by the way, I should point out, they eventually did. It was about a colony of Klingons in the Delta Quadrant. And, but they invited me to pitch. They invited us to come pitch stories. So you go in and say, hey, I have an idea. What if the Vidians come back and want Neelix as Goodlong? Or whatever, that's kind of off the top of my head, so So you pitch, you come in with 5 or 6 stories and then pitch them to a staff writer. Now, I met 2 staff writers on Voyager who were in their very first staff writing job ever, both of them. They'd just both been hired by Voyager. This guy right here, his name is Brian Fuller. I don't know if you've heard Brian. Brian was responsible for creating the series Dead Like Me, and he's responsible for Wonder Falls, if you ever saw that, all 4 episodes that aired on Fox. And great show. If you like kind of quirky, weird humor, it's all out on DVD. It's called Wonder Falls. It's great. Stars Carol DeVernus, who's now in Hannibal. Speaking of which, Brian also created Hannibal, and that's his current show. And he also created Pushing Daisies. So he's gone to be huge. So this is the person who was responsible for me being here. This is Michael Taylor. I also pitched to him. And Michael Taylor, he was a writer on Voyager, and he wrote what I think is the single best episode of Star Trek ever. 600 episodes, 5 series, Deep Space Nine: The Visitor. He wrote that one. He also wrote another favorite of mine that a lot of people like is By the Pale Moonlight. You remember that one? The one where Cisco is doing a log entry. It's basically a confession that he gave up all his values to get the Romulans in the war with the Michael wrote that. He also wrote for Battlestar. He wrote a pilot called Virtuality, if you remember that. It's what the Battlestar people did during the writer's strike. He wrote Blood and Chrome, and he co-created Defiance. So I've worked with Michael on several projects since then. Anyway, when Battlestar came online, I went to Ron Moore's panel at Galacticon 1, which was a lot less accepting than perhaps it would be today. And I said, Brian, get me on that show, please. So he pitched me to Ron. And he said, hey, if you need a science advisor, I know this guy, ... And Ron called me in his office, and one of the first things Ron said, in fact, did you ever see the CSI episode Space Oddity, the murder at a science fiction convention?
Yes.
That was patterned after Ron's panel at Galacticon, first Galacticon.
Oh, wow.
Totally. In fact, if you look, what? That's why he said that was allowing him to be in the reverse. There was totally all about his panel at Galacticon. What's funny is after the guy pitches Astro Quest Redux, you see the shocked crowd when he stands up and says, "You suck." If you look in the crowd, you'll see Rekha Sharma and Grace Park and Peggy Sue Davis, who's Bradley Thompson's wife, who was the writer of that episode. And it was written by Bradley and David, who were Galactica writers, and it was directed by Michael Mankin, and it was, and Kate Vernon was the guest star. I mean, it was just a bunch of Battlestar people doing an episode of CSI. It really was. Anyway, so Ron, we got invited to his office. The first words out of his mouth were, "You look familiar." I said, "Yeah, I asked you the only 2 polite questions you got all night at Galactica." All right. Well, at the same time, Richard was doing his Second Coming trailer. You remember that? How many have seen that? It's worth looking up. He did a really good job on that. I don't think Richard gets the credit he's deserved for helping bring Battlestar back. But you'll notice in that trailer that there's in the very beginning there's a whole platoon of Cylons. I am every single one. That's back 30 pounds ago when I fit in the suit. But it turns out that so a couple days after Ron called me in his office, Richard was talking about his role as Tom Zarek, and he said, "Hey, if you need a science advisor, I know this guy." And he said, "Oh, no, we're already talking to somebody," and they were referring to the same person. So it was fake. All right, so Battlestar Galactica obviously was a success critically. When it was on air, it wasn't a great success ratings-wise, but that's because everybody back then DVR'd it, and we didn't have a way of measuring DVR as far as counting towards ratings. So the DVD sales were through the roof. Obviously, it was a success in every respect in final accounting, but when it was broadcasted, it didn't do really well ratings-wise, just because of the technological advancement generally of the people who watched the show. They bought the DVDs, they torrented it, they did anything but watch it live because, come on, I've seen Cyber Channel commercials. But so I got hired, and I will admit that I'll tell you up front my biggest mistake in the show. So we'll get the big mistake out of the way. I actually mentioned it in the book. You have a copy of Science of Battlestar here. The biggest mistake I made in this series was in the second episode, where something I realized too late. Remember that Galactica was refueling Virgon Express. They were unrepping, it's a Navy term, underway replenishment. And they had a line connected, and they had an explosion in the water tank, blew all of the water out into space, which would, in what we call in the space program, would have been part of what we call Delta V, a change of velocity, which would have pushed Galactica away, and would have, at minimum, pulled Virgon Express with it, or at least her snap lines. But I realized that too late, and I called, wait, I called them and said, no, wait, we need to, and that ship sailed. So they said, all right, so missed that one. But in the same episode, what's kind of cool is there's some kind of Cassini references. Originally, the script calls for looking for water and looking for finding comets, because comets are mostly water. Sorry, we don't have a projector, so you have to see my little PowerPoint. You come up here, I'm trying to.
Come on in close if you can.
Come on a little closer. So we're all friends here, and I think most of us bathe. So it turns out that in the outer solar system, water is a very common element, or common compound in the universe. Water is extremely common. You have 2 very common elements, hydrogen and oxygen, 2 of your most common elements, so they combine pretty readily. And it turns out in the outer solar system, most of the moons, in fact all but one, have crusts of ice. So a planetary scientist, what you call a rock depends where you are in the solar system. In the outer solar system, ice is a rock. It is the main crustal component of most moons, except for Io. So, when they said, find a comet, I said, no. All we have to do is find a gas planet. We find a Jupiter, we find a Saturn, we find ice planets, we find ice moons, we have our water. We have all the water we ever need. And ironically, people have came back since then and said, why didn't you just look for a comet? You can't put just in any sentence and make it sound easy. Comets, there might be lots and lots of comets. There might be trillions of comets that are around the sun. That's probably a good number. They're hard to find. They're small and they're dark. Because comets tend to be crusted with a dark crust. We learned that in '86 when the European spacecraft Giotto flew past Halley's Comet. It's black. Even though it's mostly ice, it's got a black crust. Comets are hard to find unless they're close to the sun, and then they're moving like a bat out of you know where. So ice moons were a good call, and this is Enceladus, the moon of Saturn, that actually has ice geysers on it. So we call this Cold Faithful. And that's in fact where we went. We went to water, we went to an ice moon. We found a Jovian, a Jupiter-like planet, and we went to an ice moon to find our water. And we actually milked that or mined that for a couple episodes, because next episode we had to go down to get it, and that's where we needed the prisoners on Astral Queen. Thank you. Titan. I said that the spacecraft I worked on, Cassini, was a mission to Saturn and Titan. And you'll notice that the 4th and 5th episodes of the season 1 centered around a Titan-like moon orbiting a Saturn-like planet. You think that was a Cassini influence? Yes, but it's not my influence. Turns out that, well, firstly, Titan goes way back in science fiction. This is a picture painted by Chesley Bonestell, famous space artist, that appeared on the picture of Life magazine, cover of Life magazine in 1948. And you'll see several things influenced here, or implied by this painting.